As we share today, we're sharing the story of the demon-possessed man. And as I begin, I want you to know, at the end of my message today, I'm sharing an audio clip that I came across online. And I just want you to know, it's pretty raw on what the people in the audio clip will be talking about. And so they're going to be talking about their struggles and the voices they hear. And one lady talks about her struggles with her own self-identity, with a sexual relationship she had with her man. So I want you to know that coming into that, and I want you to know that if you want to get up and leave, you won't offend me. If you're not ready or willing to hear that, that's fine. There's no judgment there. But I just want you to know coming into that, because it pertains, I think, to where we're at, and I think it pertains to what we've been called to as a mission for God. That if we are called and we are doing what God has called us to do in His mission, we're going to come across, I think, the kind of people that this audio clip will be revealing. But I also think, if we're being really honest, some of the things that they say are going to resonate within us, and we're going to be able to identify with some of those very hard stories. And if we're not a place, if the church isn't a sanctuary, and I'm not talking about a building, I'm talking about a people. If the people of God are not a sanctuary where broken and messed up lives can come in contact with God despite their shortfalls, then I think we really miss the point of what the gospel is. So I'm sharing it, and I want you to know that that is coming. And so after I read the scripture, the story of this, it'll be shortly after that. You're welcome to leave. I understand if you leave, but I want you to know that. This is an interesting message, the way it lined up as we continue to walk through the E100 and walk through the New Testament stories. And for this one to fall right after Halloween weekend, I think is very interesting. Halloween is an interesting holiday. Its origins are pretty profound. It's a celebration that came out of the Druids, the Druid culture, where they believed that this was the last, October 31st was the last night of their year, and then November 1st was their new year, and I don't think they used those calendar dates, those months. But Hallows Eve started as a belief that all these spirits that had died that previous year would come out of their graves, and then they would be pursued as they were then taken to the afterlife. So saints, or lives good and bad, would be upraised from the dead, and float around as spirits in the world until they were discovered that night. And so that's how it began, and to see that it's now become it's the second most spent holiday in the Western culture. Next to Christmas, Halloween, we spend the second most at Halloween, and decorations and candy and costumes, and it's become this a fun night of make-believe, at least, as in our house, as we have kids. And a few years ago, if you saw us, we dressed up as the Incredible Family, and it worked out really well. And we just had fun doing that. And it's so exciting for my kids to have that time of make-believe and to pretend in that ceremony. And then, man, what a great time to meet neighbors and other people that live alongside of you. And so it's very interesting to see where it started and where it has become in our culture. And it's baffling to think that it's the second most consumeristic holiday in our world. That was an interesting stat for me. Well, we deal with this story in Scripture where Jesus is doing his ministry, and he crosses the lake, and he goes outside of the territory that he's been working in, and he goes to a Gentile area. He goes to a Gentile neighborhood in Gerasenes. And there's this man who is demon-possessed and is struggling. And it's in Mark, it's in all the synoptic gospels, but it's in Mark that we're reading from today. And this is chapter 5. It says, "They arrived on the other side of the lake in the region of the Gerasenes. And when Jesus climbed out of a boat, a man possessed by an evil spirit came out of the cemetery to meet him. And the man lived among the burial caves and could no longer be restrained, even with a chain. And whenever he was put into chains and shackles, as he often was, he would snap the chains from his wrist, and he would smash the shackles, and no one was strong enough to subdue him. And day and night he wandered among the burial caves and the hills, howling and cutting himself with sharp stones. And when Jesus was still some distance away, the man saw him and ran to meet him and bowed low before him. And with a shriek, he screamed, "Why are you interfering with me, Jesus, Son of the Most High God? In the name of God, I beg you, don't torture me." For Jesus had already said to the spirit, "Come out of that man, you evil spirit." And then Jesus demanded, "What is your name?" And he replied, "My name is Legion, because there are many of us inside this man." And the evil spirits begged him again and again not to send them to some distant place. And there happened to be a large herd of pigs feeding on the hillside nearby. "Send us into those pigs," the spirit begged. "Let us enter into them." And so Jesus gave them permission, and the evil spirits came out of the man and entered the pigs. And the entire herd of 2,000 pigs plunged down the steep hillside and into the lake and drowned in the water. The herdsmen fled to the nearby town and the surrounding countryside, spreading the news of what happened. And a crowd soon gathered around Jesus, and they saw the man who had been possessed by a legion of demons. And he was sitting there, fully clothed and perfectly sane, and they were all afraid. And those who had seen what had happened told the others, and the demon-possessed man and the pigs, and the crowd began pleading with Jesus to go away, to leave them alone. And as Jesus was getting into the boat, the man who had been demon-possessed begged to go with him. And Jesus said, "No, go home. Go back to your family and tell them everything the Lord has done for you and how merciful he has been." So the man started off to visit the 10 towns of that region and began to proclaim the great things Jesus had done for him, and everyone was amazed at what he told them. Now as I read this story, I kind of need to offer this as well. Stories like this I struggle with because I've never had an experience with demons. I've heard stories. I've had stories told to me that raise the hair on the back of my arms and my neck. But I've never had this experience. So when it comes to me and reading these things in the faith, I struggle with them. I become a little bit of a cynic with them. I kind of hold them at arm's length and say, I don't really know what to do with this because I've never had this experience. That's not to say that I don't believe these things can happen. I don't believe these things are real. But I haven't seen with my own eyes, and so I don't really know how to deal with this. Okay, so you need to understand that that's where I'm coming from as I read these things. But as I read the story, there's some interesting things here. The man identifies that the demon inside is Legion. And Legion was a name and a title for the Roman armies. It was a classification of up to 5,400 soldiers within the Roman army. Which is an interesting thing to me because as I read that and I think about that, what the demon is saying and what essentially this man is saying is, I'm not in control of my own body. And not only am I not in control, but I have many voices that are trying to define me. They're trying to create my identity. They're trying to run my life. And I thought, how many identities do I let control my life? How many armies or subsets of armies do I have pulling for my time and my attention and my thoughts? How much clutter and noise and distraction is running around in not only my head, but in my heart and in my soul because I'm letting things control me? The other thing about this story is we've talked about systems and how the sins that Jesus is addressing in the New Testament isn't just individual sin of the person, but he's also talking about the sins of systems and the systems that we get trapped in sin and have a hard time being free from. And so if he's calling, and this demon is calling itself Legion, I wonder if Jesus is here is saying, I am going to cast out the ruling authorities of Rome so that my people can be free. So those who want to be in pursuit of me, be in my way, they'll be free from Rome's control to pursue me. And if that's the case, then there's some interesting thing that happened in this story. We know that pigs were not part of the Jewish faith. They were an unclean animal, and so Jews wouldn't be caught dead with a pig. They wouldn't put pigs in their story unless they were talking about how gross and disgusting they were. And so for Jesus to cast demons into a pig and for them to perish, for a Jewish audience, they're like, well, yeah, dirty animals. But to any good American, we're going to say, oh, bacon, deviled ham. And no doubt this would have happened to those farmers who owned these pigs. This was their livestock. This was their cash crop. And to see that to perish and for them to lose that money, I imagine there probably weren't insurance programs in that day. In fact, maybe this is where insurance programs began. Protect your livestock against saviors coming in and casting out demons into the water. But he ruined the system. He ruined the economic system of these people, and the people don't like it. Which means this: when Jesus shows up into places where he's not known and where he's a foreigner, and he does big and great things, the people do not know him and are not aware of him, they are going to be threatened by Jesus. Whoa. Whoa. Then when people see other people experiencing the freedom from oppression, from demon possession, from the things that have them bound up, when they are around those person and they seek that freedom, the people are going to be afraid of that. And I think rightfully so. Right? We see people change. We have a hard time letting people change. Someone who maybe pursued this way of life and they go away, or they have this experience and they come out of it and they're a completely different person. And we're like, wait a second, are you trying to fool me? You trying to pull the wool over my eyes? Is this a gimmick? I'm waiting for oh, I gotcha. And sometimes the shoe never falls and we realize, man, maybe they were changed. Maybe they were different, but that leaves us unsettled when we've known them. And then they make that drastic change. And I don't think it should. Not when we adhere to the gospel. Not when we hear and read what's here in Scripture and the promises that are here that tell us that while we were still sinners, Christ died on the cross for us. Or Paul's promise of nothing can separate us from the love of God. Nothing. Nothing. But oftentimes, doesn't the church separate people from the love of God? Right? Don't we create a barrier that says, sorry, you've just sinned one too many times. You've just reached your limit. God's grace is exhausted. I'm sorry. In this story, at the beginning of the story, shackles could not keep him bound from Christ. That he continues to break free, and why Jesus is far off. The demons see him and call out to him. Whoa, those are great stories. So what happens when we read this story and we step into this story and we say, who is the legion in my life? Where are my allegiances that are keeping me from stepping in stride with the rabbi to where I can't follow him? And what are the systems that if we truly step in line with Christ, what are the systems that are going to be shaken, that are going to be ruined? What's going to happen if you step into the Advent conspiracy and you tell your family, hey, you're not going to get gifts this Christmas because we want to give gifts to people who wouldn't get them otherwise. We're going to make a difference in other people's lives. Yeah, we know you'd really could use a new sweater and a gaudy tie. But these people could use a home. These people could have a shoe business that then would provide for their family. These kids that live here in the Midwest could have hats and gloves. So yeah, the coat keeps their body warm, but what about their heads and what about their digits? That we're going to give that gift because we believe that's a gift that gives what Jesus gave. That's a gift of joy. That's a gift of peace. That's a gift knowing that people are looking out for me just as God is looking out for them. We get to be the hands and feet of Christ. We get to put on flesh of God and say, God loves you. We love you. You're valuable. You have worth. We see you. It's going to rock systems. It's going to change systems. But there's another interesting thing that happens. He doesn't just heal the man. He doesn't just rescue him from this legion. He rescues him, and then he doesn't take him with him. The man wants to go. He says, I want to follow Jesus. He says, no, go home. See, Jesus heals, and then he restores people to a community. He doesn't just heal them and let them go. He heals them, and we saw this with the blind man. He heals them, and then he says, now go to the Pharisees so they can deem you clean, and by being clean, then you'll be able to integrate back into society. You'll be able to go to the temple. You'll be able to go home to your family. He heals this non-Jew, and then he says, now go back to your community and tell them what I've done. And initially they're afraid and they're in shock and awe, but they see this man changed, and it says they believed and they were amazed at what he told them. I want to share this audio clip. It's the confessions of a number of individuals who deal with their own voices, their own demons, their own struggles. As I said, I think some of these stories may resonate with some of us here. And so I want you to be ready for that. And I want you to know that if a story resonates with you, if it connects with you or connects with someone that you know or that you're close to, I want you to know that you're not alone. I want you to know that you don't have to struggle alone in a cave and be shackled to those things because you're a danger to yourself or your others, or that your friends or your family or your loved ones, that they're not alone in this, that they are not separated from God because of their thoughts and the voices that they hear in their head, that Christ can restore, that Christ can mend fences, that Christ can heal.
Back to Vox Diaboli. Of course, we all have things inside ourselves that we want to fight. 12-step programs and self-help books and organized religion would not do such a thriving business if this were not so common. But sometimes the voice in one's head really does seem like a voice. Addicts talk about this a lot. This is the voice of having one drink, just one drink. You deserve it. You can handle it. Just one drink. Well, one of our producers, Nancy Updike, started asking around about whether people felt like they were under a spell of an inner voice like this. And it was like people had been waiting all their lives for somebody to ask them this question. She heard from serial cheaters and road ragers and moveaholics, a guy who obsessively buys too much food to the point where he goes into debt. People compulsive in ways that she had never heard of. Here are some of them. Quick warning to listeners, there's nothing explicit in here, but one of the people in here does acknowledge the existence of sex.
I certainly know what voice you're talking about.
The voice is irresistible, always. I'm in the thrall of that voice.
Totally out of control. It's got this life of its own, and I can't tame it anymore.
Up until recently, that voice has made me a very poor man.
I actually have a name for the voice. I call it Stan. Stan is the guy who tells me to have the extra glass of wine. Stan is the guy who tells me to smoke.
I remember somehow realizing just how finely calibrated the voice was to every nuance, every part of my feelings, including the feeling that I didn't want to smoke cigarettes. And it's just like, might as well have another cigarette because this is it. Tomorrow you're going to quit.
Oh, yeah, my voice can pull up statistics like obesity is a killer.
So the voice would also say, well, it's not that many beers, because, in fact, if you're thin enough, you actually don't have to drink all that much to get high.
Go back to bed for 5 minutes, just 5 minutes. 5 more minutes, close your eyes, you'll feel great.
And then tomorrow something would happen. And there was a good reason to smoke that day, and then it was, oh, you already smoked today, so today's not the day you're going to quit. So smoke another cigarette.
And then I'll get up 5 minutes later, and it'll be like, you don't need to iron the skirt. Do you really need to iron the skirt? If you need to iron the skirt, do you need to be wearing the skirt? Maybe you could wear a different skirt, and then you could sleep for 10 more minutes. And that seems like a reasonable negotiation.
One of the things I do that the voice came up with is, when I binge and purge, you never can be sure how much you got back up. So the voice came up with the idea that if I put a coffee can on a scale and adjusted the weight to include the weight of the coffee can and weighed all my food before I ate it and then threw up in the same coffee can, I could judge by the weight how much came up. But that's one of the things that I don't want to do that. How complicated and time-consuming and just humiliating is that? And the voice is like, yeah, but do you really want to run the risk of leaving some extra food in there?
The voice definitely brings in also an element of shame. It says, you want everyone to think that you have money. You want everyone to see that you're generous and you can give and put yourself out there financially. It'll prove that you're, not a poor kid.
And it also says a lot of mean things, too. Your husband's too good for you. You may as well have a glass of wine because without it you won't be as entertaining.
When we decided to get engaged and we had been living together for a little while, the voice was like, we tricked him into giving you the ring. Okay, that's a start. But you better, try your hardest to make sure he doesn't take it away because he's going to find out the truth about you and how much you suck. So you better distract him with a really thin body.
Well, let me just do this one. If I pop it, I'll have smooth skin. My skin will look nice after I do this. I've definitely scarred my skin. I can see the scars even though I'm wearing makeup and everything.
It's the same thing, and it always pushes me the same direction, and I'm always the same 40 minutes late.
I think I probably gave the bank over $2,000 in service charges. That voice was so charming.
I think one thing that sort of got me in a standoff against the voice this year was I slept with a guy who has a girlfriend, and she's kind of a bigger girl, and he had slept with a bunch of other girls in town that I knew, and they were all heavy girls. And I slept with him, and I was thinking to myself, I must have rocked his world because I'm thin, and he's used to fat girls. And then I found out he was going around town saying that having sex with me was like having sex with a pile of paper clips, which is not nice. And for a couple of days, I was kind of like, maybe you're wrong, voice. Maybe you're wrong, and maybe I should gain weight, and maybe I should stop sleeping with these men. And, that lasted for a couple of days, and the voice was like, when he said pile of paper clips, all the other girls were jealous when they heard that. And at least he's talking about you. At least you made an impression on him. No matter what they say, the voice turns it into a compliment.
The last part of that interview is the interviewer comes on, and that last story I think is a tough one. But the interviewer comes on, and she says, "How do you feel like you're handling that voice?" And the woman says, I think the voice has control, essentially. And she laughs in her response, I think out of irony. She says, I'm losing this battle to the voice. The voice tells us everything that we want to hear. The voice keeps us off balance, and even when we do good things, the voice whispers lies into our life that are false. And I don't know what the voice is telling you. I think we all have experienced to some degree dealt with that voice. But if you are in a place where you're losing to the voice, I want you to know that this is a place where people will love you and support you and help you gain control over that voice. To help you be free from the things that are keeping you chained and oppressed in your life. And so if you want to, if you choose to, you can write down what the voice is saying to you and get that to me, and I will hold that in confidence. And I will pray with you and pray for you as you begin to make this journey to break free from the things that are keeping you trapped in your life, so that you can experience the freedom that Christ offers. We're going to pray through song, the song Blessed Assurance. Make this your time of prayer, devotion. If you want to come and use the altar, this time is yours. If you want to kneel in your chair, you can do that. However you need to pray, however you want to pray. If you need to pray with someone, come alongside them and pray. This time is yours. In Psalm 118, the psalmist says, "In my distress, I cry out to God." May you cry out to God this week with whatever distress the voice has put upon your heart, mind, body, soul, and relationships. And may God grant you the peace that you can begin to walk down that path towards healing. May God be with you.
And also with you.
You may go in peace.